I am the vice president of the German-Hungary Association, and I hope to come to Veszprém as fast as possible. But now I speak as my profession. I'm director of tourist board in Linz since 2007. I started 2 years ago when Linz 09 started. And yes, I have a lot of experiences to this main issue, European Capital of Culture. And Sylvia Ammann give me this title for my speech. And communication, I will say it is a little bit more in my presentation. I will say creating. What can we do with the title Cultural European Capital of Culture? And when you read in an international level, I think the strategy, the way should be from the inside to the outside. It is a very good brand, European Capital of Culture, but when you not Vienna or not Salzburg, when you Linz or Veszprém, you have to go smaller steps, but you have a lot of possibilities to come into the mind of experts, of a lot of media, but the B2C communication, you should start in your home country and the neighbor countries. This is my first, yes, what I would say. But now I will start with a small film.
Linz ist eine Stadt für Senioren.
Eine Mischung aus Dorf und Stadt.
Altmodisch.
Bisschen rassistisch. Was man an Linz vielleicht noch besser machen könnte, wäre das Image.
Welcome to a city unlike anything you have ever seen.
Fahren oder was?
Open to the world and tolerant, charming, endearing, and beautiful. But we are not what you would expect from the Alpine Republic. Do you want fiaker? Go to Vienna. Are you looking for Mozart? Look in Salzburg.
Willst du Schnee? Schau nach Kitzbühel.
Yeah, we are the underdog. Outsiders have always been welcome here. What we offer is a different version of Austria, without the bells and whistles. With unique attractions, once-in-a-lifetime experiences, and architectural goodies. We are a stronghold of fine dining, a culinary mecca. We might not be Berlin, but we do set trends. We're also not Paris, but we are sort of romantic.
Blumen sind die schönste Sprache der Welt.
You can't find London anywhere around, but Elton John sings for us every day.
Linz is the place to be.
We are not Houston.
Aber Probleme haben wir.
Our city is far from perfect, but one thing we can promise you. The people here will welcome you with open arms.
Das gibt's ja nicht, jetzt sind die noch immer da. Ja. Schlägt dich heim! Touristen!
Well, most of them.
Besuchen Sie Linz, meine Lieben.
So, first a little bit shocking. This film, you saw it, is not a classic tourist touristic exercise, touristic advertising video, but it's our strategy to bring an authentic city in the mind. And we learned this by 2009 when our artistic directors, Martin Heller and Uli Fuchs, brought a new view to Linz. And my strategy in the last 10, 15 years was to bring it in a continuity. And this is part of the branding of Linz. We will not do that we are an old city with churches, with castles, with ruins and so. No, we are a modern city. And we will present our touristic advertising as a modern, as an authentic city. And we learned this through the process in Linz 09. Now, I have 10 headlines for you to bring you a little bit of feeling how we think, how we work, what was our experiences in this process 2009 and the following years. I think Linz is a best practice. What can a capital of culture achieve? It was 2009 and it started 2009. And you saw we had a development. 2014, we were UNESCO City of Media Arts, a very interesting title, but a very difficult title. It's not so easy to bring it in a B2C communication. Linz was the winner in 2019 in the submission category Cultural Heritage and Creativity, which was the first competition of European Capital of Smart Tourism of the European Commission. I was very proud to this success. And now Linz is a symbol of modern Austria. The Austrian president, Alexander van der Bellen, come to Linz with his colleagues from Germany, from Switzerland, from Luxembourg. And on the question, why he comes to Linz with his colleagues, he said he will show his colleagues the modern Austria. And I think it's, for me, a very good term, what he said. 10 years after European Capital of Culture, we have the image Linz is modern Austria. Linz is not the same as the classic Austria like Vienna or Salzburg. Linz has her own standing, and this is a result of European Capital of Culture. The next chart, please. Yes, you see some pictures here in the Ars Electronica Center in the 8K tip space. And the next chart, please. Yes, the experience from Linz 09. On the one hand, Linz 09 was the temporary high point of development with many investments in culture. It succeeded in positively changing a dirty, unattractive industrial city. And in Linz, a lot was built, museums, concert halls, a new railway to our Prestingberg, the new Ars Electronica Center, and 2 intendants, cultural directors were hired from outside. It was an experiment, and I think it was very important. Martin Heller, he died 4 weeks ago. It was very important for Linz, and Dr. Uli Fuchs, who were able to curate the city over a longer period of time with a budget around 70 millions. Also 20 millions from the Republic of Austria, 20 millions from the country of Upper Austria, and 20 millions from the city of Linz, and 10 millions comes by other comes by payment and by from the European Commission. The next chart, please. Yes, the picture what I have should bring to you a little bit imagination how Linz feels and what is Linz. We have no classic city photos. We have another strategy to bring Linz in pictures. The next, yes, Linz changes. This slogan started 2009. We had a slogan, it's very well known, in Linz is beginning, in Linz begins in German. Culture as a factor of transformation. I think this is a very important statement. And I will say culture alone does not change the city. It needs a common strategy and it needs reinforcement through marketing. Only new buildings is too less. In Linz is the Tourism Association, the institution that coordinates, networks, communicates, and translates culture into products and experiences. I'm a translator, I am a communicator, and we realize every year an annual focal point, an annual focus. For example, nature, music, Danube, art living, UNESCO City of Media Arts, and actually people. Our message are the people of Linz, not the buildings are the city, the people are the city. It's said an old Greek philosopher. And you have to bring it in experience things, implementation in city tours, programs with experience-oriented components and encounters. I think tourism, it's very important to realize, to organize encountering processes. And this is not so easy as only to visit some buildings and some old ruins. And very important for me is putting value on the city. That's what it's all about. Bring not only city as a change for as an experience for advertising, putting value on the city. This is one of my central things what I try to do. What is my strategy? Please to the next. Yes, for example, what is going on in Linz? In our Haber, we have a process of big murals. Artists from all over the world come to Linz in the last years, and we have an open air gallery. And what you can see on this example is that the capital of culture was not alone and ended 2009. A lot of impacts come after 2009, and Linz grew up as a very interesting cultural city. Please to the next. Yes. What do I have experiences from other cities? My experience is that in many cities there's a coexistence of culture and tourism. Low acceptance among the people involved. Tourism does not understand culture, and culture does not understand tourism. It's very often there. So, and after the capital of culture, there is a relapse to the usual city cliches, because that was the guest wants. I say allegedly. I learned that we should not do what the guest wants. We should do what our city is. And this is what I mean with putting value on the city. I think it's a very important process, and it's not usual in city, in tourism destination. I think this was new is in Linz, and brought the sustainable success for the city of The next picture, please. Yes, we have a lot of festivals, a lot of activities outdoor, and you need no, there is no entrance fee. Culture for all. This is a very important strategy that people can be part of cultural activities like Wasserspektakel, like Klangwolke, like many other things. Now, to the next chart, please. Yes. Now, some ideas from my side to cultural capitals as tourist game changers after Corona. I think we are in a new situation, and I think in European Capital of Culture you can see some processes. What is going on in tourism? Tourism was sick before Corona, but now we need some new things to a better, to a more qualified tourism. I think tourism in the future will be more individual, more personal, more authentic, more playful, more hybrid, more poetic, and more alive. In short, I say we are on the way to a smarter tourism. And the artistic directors of the European Capital of Culture, not only Linz, I saw a lot of other cities. From the culture came this movement into a smarter tourism experiences, to a smarter tourism strategy. I hope after Corona, smaller groups allow for higher quality programs. Tourism has become too industrial, too standardized, sorry. Courage for free, spaces for improvisation. And I think it's very important that we have changes of a new perception. Cultural capitals are attractive for inquisitive people. Traditional cities are for people who are looking for the same thing over and over again, who are already, as I sick of old, are looking for something new. We couldn't do it in Linz when we not did the background of European Capital of Culture. I think it was a very very important step to this way. Yes. Now this is Linz, the buildings, and please to the next charts. What are the steps, elements for getting closer between culture and tourism? In Linz, we have a museum cooperation. We have own products such as Culture Card 365. It's for the inhabitants. We have Linz cards own for the tourists, for the guests. And we have own formats like Museum Total and a lot of common marketing activities. I said in a chart before that annual themes to bring together all the activities in culture in the museums, agreeing on an annual focus that links the various exhibitions and cultural offerings. There are our annual themes like at time people, and in former years Danube or Art of Living, Music, Nature are a very good stage to bring it in a common communication. Then new products, experiences. We used the time of Corona to develop trend tours. For example, for art of living, for literature, for architecture, to bring a little more deepness in the programs for guests, for tourists to visit, to experience a city. And I think it's about the broader understanding between culture and tourism. All what I tell you, what we did there, it was necessary to have more acceptance between the actors in culture and my colleagues, my employees, my Austria guides, to work together between tourism and culture. Please, the next. Yes, this is a second picture from our deep space in the Architektronica Center. I hope you will come to Linz next time. I'm very happy when colleagues, when friends from other European capitals of culture come to Linz to discuss with you, to present you our things, what we have in our cultural buildings and what we have in other parts like gastronomy and yes, in areas like our harbor, Mural Harbor, we can organize, I think, very interesting programs. So the next, yes, culture and tourism. I say we should be at the eye level as an ecosystem. Who develops the city slogan and what happens with it? I think Touristiken should not be only a translator. We should develop narratives. We should answer the why questions. Touristikens are always people who can say what we have. We have a lot of things, museums, shipping on the Danube, restaurants and so on, but they have no answers to the why questions. And we meet no narratives, and based on the narrative, we need better experiences. Tourism and culture must merge more. On the one hand, the idea of how more guests could come must not cause any fear of contact with culture. On the other hand, tourism must not try to instrumentalize culture for its own purposes. Culture must not be seen in isolation from the targets and processes of a destination. Tourism must be more than frills and cliché. And now I come back to our film, what I showed you. We have a lot of courage. We are very free to do this. Not all inhabitants were happy about this film in Linz. Our mayor wasn't happy, and I had a lot of discussions, but I think such discussions bring us forward, and such a film, not every city can do the same film, but such a film brings on the point that we try to be authentic, that we try to be, yes, other as other colleagues in other cities. Please, the next. Yes, the Danube for us is a very important part of Linz, because I think I see that be part of a great Danube network. We have at time very interesting EU project with the title Trans-Danube Stories. We wrote with partners from over 6 countries narratives over more countries, not only for one point on the Danube, from Germany to Hungary, from Hungary to the Black Sea, with issues nature, with issue by contemplation, by religious things along the Danube, by cultural things along the Danube. And we hope that the Danube has a perspective, will have a perspective not only by Danube cruises and by biking. We want culture tourism by bus, by train, by cars, from city to city along the Danube over more countries, over 4, 5, 6 days. And this is what we developed with the Danube as a blue band to experience Europe. Please, the next part, yes. What my philosophy is, from enumeration to narration, experience. I said it by the Danube, but I think we share narratives. Narratives are needed, as well as more challenging, lasting and touching experiences. And I think for this, people play a central role. It's not about beautiful showcases and installations, but about those we explain and value it. I think it's not learned to bring people more in the role of a central part of experience. And I plea for better and more sustainable experiences in tourism. We speak a lot of experiences, but what we sell, what we mean, it's experience. A visit in a museum or so, it's not an experience per se. I think experience is what us transforms about what we discuss when we are at home, what we tell our friends and our family partners. This is an experience, and not only a and we have too much programs and too less experiences. And experience can be to have no program, to improvise, to be in a city without program and look what is going on. So the next, please. Yes, people. In Linz, you can make your own graffiti. We have such experience. I think a graffiti school, it can be an experience. And please to the next chart. Yes. The result of this philosophy is from sightseeing to encounter. People instead of sceneries. The people, I said it, are the city and not the houses. I'm a very strong critic of a lot of guided tours. Many guided tours, I think it's Wikipedia on 2 legs, and this is not necessary. A guide should more a translator, escort, interesting man, woman to speak with our guests. Presenting houses, it's easy. They stand there, they don't walk away, but presenting people, involving them in programs is much more difficult, but the real challenge and the basis for real experiences. And this is why I think the connection between culture, between museums, between concert halls, between other activities in culture and tourism programs should be closer, that we present not only the houses, we should present the people behind these houses, the art directors, the employees, the actors who are working in the cultural institutions. So now the next, please. Yes, but said you have a little bit imagination from Linz. Our Sectronica Center is one of our less landmarks. What you see here, it was built 2009, and I come to my last chart, and the consequence. What I said is that we try to realize a tourism without tourists. And this is not a city without people, without guests. And you know, tourists always see others. Who wants to be a tourist today? We have a big discussion all over the world, but especially in Europe and especially in cities, they have too much tourism, and we should be more sensible for all things, what is going on when tourists come into a city. I think tourism after Corona is a chance for more authenticity, and I think tourism must be good for everyone. It must not become an additional stress for the population, and the service industry needs qualified and adequately paid employees. I think it's necessary more than ever. A destination is not an anonymous product that can simply be used. Destination is a living cosmos where people, the population, business and employees, but also nature and environment play an important a connectivity role. And I hope you understand why I brought these aspects very strong in my presentation. European Capital of Culture, I hope in Salzkammergut in Bad Ischl 2024 can start a process to go in this direction. And when we realize this, we have a chance to be a destination for the future, a destination for the 2000 for our century. And I think tourism has to change a lot in all these things. What we can find when we see what is going on in our cities. And I wish you that you have the chance with your European Capital of Culture to move this process. And in Linz, we will help. We will fight for this new tourism in our century.
I'm really happy to share our experiences from Rijeka 2020. It was a very exceptional European Capital of Culture that actually was implemented during this disastrous year that when Corona hit not just Europe, but the whole world. And I really hope that nothing like that will ever happen again. I was just looking at our bid book the other day where we did a SWOT analysis. And, you know, in the section of what would go wrong, of course, nobody would ever put a global pandemic or volcano eruption or, I don't know, space evasion. But I don't know, we live in crazy times and things like that can happen. Anyhow, let's go to the presentation. I will really start to try to lead you from the process from the beginning of bidding till the end, because I have really privilege of participating in creating European Capital of Culture from the very idea that when it took form in the city to bid to the very last moment. Rijeka 2020 company is now in liquidation, so we have completely ended the whole cycle. I will talk about the international aspect of the project and its communication in its different phases. For you who do not know, just a few facts about Rijeka. So, of course, it's in Croatia. It's a rather small city of some 130,000 inhabitants. Third largest city in Croatia. It's a center of economic, administrative, cultural center of the county or the region where we are found. And it's a city that is squeezed between the islands in the Corner Bay, squeezed on the littoral by the port and surrounded by the mountains. And it's also a city with very important industrial past, industrial heritage, it's the biggest port in Croatia, and the port really defines still nowadays what city is and how a city develops. All these facts were really taken in consideration when we thought about which story to say about city. I must say that this was the first time that Croatian cities bid for designation of European Capital of Culture. It was in 2013. Rijeka had really tough competition. Some of the cities that competed with us were Dubrovnik or the capital city Zagreb or other cities with really interesting stories. It was really question, how do we sell our city? How do we sell our narrative? It was obviously clear that Rijeka cannot out-pretty Dubrovnik or out-fame Dubrovnik. You all know about Dubrovnik. It's also, we cannot out-huge London or out-sped Doha. But what it was clear that we can out-innovate them. So it was also a question very similar to what we heard about Linz. It was really a question from the very beginning, how do we create an innovative story? How do we create innovative narratives around the story? And finally, how do we find innovative tools to, so to say, sell that story? And this is I think the chart or the illustration that all of us who work in the European Capital of Culture, and when it comes to communication, also we have to keep in mind. We really start from the goals, from the very first thoughts of why we are bidding. So why we are bidding, what are our goals? Goals are, of course, social and economic, cultural, you know, all of them. I'm sure you're thinking about them. And goals are really important from the very beginning to the last moment when you're doing evaluation about your city, evaluation of your year, and what have you done and how you have done that. In the case of Rijeka, among other goals, it was definitely a question of how to reposition the city, how to make a city that was a former industrial city, a city that is going through a change of identity, the city that is looking for new identity. How do you make it into an interesting cultural destination, interesting not just for tourism, but also more attractive for new inhabitants, new students, new investors, if you want, more attractive even for your own citizens. And finally, how do you find economic outcomes out of that? From our goals, we thought about our messages. What are the messages? What are the values that Rijeka can articulate to Europe, first of all, at national level, but also to Europe and globally? Then you translate those messages and those values into program. Program is what, because we are after all cultural capitals, everything else is around that. But the first core thing that we need to do, we need to articulate our goals and our messages into a very strong, culturally and artistically strong program. And finally, we are communicating that. And if we are communicating that, we are finding strategies, tools, channels, partners. Of course, communication changes through timing, changes to the process of the whole creating and implementing European Capital of Culture. So it's very different at the beginning or at the end. It's very different right after the designation and in the year that you're implementing your program. And you need to keep all these in mind. But as I said, again, I'm really stressing this circle. And throughout the process, I think it's very valuable to go back to the beginning, to remind yourself what were your goals, what were your primary sets, and just maybe also focus on a few of them. I'm sure at the beginning we all have like 20 things in mind, but if we focus on some things, it's much easier to deliver them. Remind yourself and your audiences, different audiences, of the messages, of the values, and of course, all of that will help you work strongly on the program and finally on the communication. So I will just quickly go through our first two bid books. The international communication is, of course, very tightly linked with what is asked for us, and that is the articulation of the European dimension. European dimension goes also to, we can call it a global dimension, but it's very important to start from the European level because that is our main also geographical area of communication, and that is our main audience. After that, we really thought about structural levels. So who are we addressing? European cities, European cultural network, European universities, cultural institutions, etc. And finally, how that translates on geographical level. So we identified that those are going to be, first of all, our sister cities, our cities in the region, our neighboring countries. In our case, it's very important to work with the Western Balkans and the countries of the former Yugoslavia, countries that were surrounding Croatia, and finally, find connections through Europe and the world. Our thematic level of collaboration was also important. So the messages that I told you, we also articulated around three main topics, and these were topics of water, work, and migrations, topics that very strongly communicate about what city of Rijeka is, but also linked us with the very important issues in Europe and globally, if you want. As you can see, of course, it's like in all European Capital of Culture's first bid books, everything was still very vague and very general, but it was a very strong start. And what I thought was very important is that we kept continuity of those messages throughout the bidding, all to the implementation year. In the second bid book, of course, this whole narrative was more strongly articulated, and what the main message and the main values that we were trying to translate was articulated under the slogan of Port of Diversity, which placed Rijeka as an open city, a city that celebrated diversity, a city that was open. What was more important, what we wanted to do was to question that diversity, diversity in the city, but also how we live that diversity in Europe today. As I said, the main message, the main slogan, Port of Diversity, three main topics. This whole narrative was translated into 7 program lines, but also additional programs that were very important also for the communication about the whole project. So not just a very strong artistic cultural programs, but also project lines, programs that strongly involved local inhabitants, local citizens, made them into active components and active protagonists in what we were trying to do. We also created a lot of programs that are very important for communicating the project internationally under the title of cultural diplomacy, created and hosted a lot of conferences, and finally have a classroom. I'm going to talk more about that in the following slides. As I said, the continuity of the narratives were very important for us, and I think they're also important for keeping the cohesion and the clarity of the message that you are sending from your city. Our cultural program was structured into 7 program lines. I'm not going to go into each one of them separately now, but each had a very strong international dimension and international elements that was communicated throughout the whole project. The video was made by a well-known and awarded filmmaker from Croatia, Dalibor Matanic. It also won awards afterward. If you remember, in the previous slide, I said how timing also of communication changes. So this is a very good beginning of international communication in the beginning, where you still do not have your program, and of course you are not only that you do not have your program, but 3 years ahead, you will not go on tourist fairs in Berlin or Milan and talk about the opera that's going to happen. But you are communicating more of a sense of the city, what I mentioned on several occasions, the values and the messages that you're sending. So this support of diversity video is a very good example of that. So you still don't know what is going to happen in Rijeka in 2020, but it gives you a very good flavor of what kind of a city you will be able to visit, what kind of a culture. The figures, the characters that appear in the video are also very much linked with the history of Rijeka, not just its historical periods, but also with the recent history and with the values of a city that promotes contemporary culture, punk culture that was always on the forefront of different alternative movements. This was just one of the videos that was made, of course, for the purposes of communication, and there were other aimed at different targets and at different times. As we approached the year, the communication messages became more and more concrete, more facts, dates, names, etc. Partnership is another very important thing that I think we all need to keep in mind when talking about communication, especially international communication, what we are focusing on nowadays. ECoCs, if you compare it with what we heard around Linz, ECoCs resources, which were much lower, in terms of staff, in terms of budgets. But what we did in that case, we really looked for different types of partners that joined us in communicating our project and in reaching our goals. First of all, media. These are, of course, straightforward partners, local, national, European, global medias, both print and electronic digital medias that we worked intensely with together with our partners to spread our message. But what is more important is our institutional promotional partners. So we really, from the very beginning, built strong ties with Croatian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, especially with their diplomatic and consular network in Europe and around the world. Of course, with the Ministry of Culture and with different instances and level that are work around tourism in Croatia, National Tourist Board, local, regional, national tourism organizations, and of course the President's Office. This institutional promotional partnership was particularly important for us because in the same year where Rijeka was European Capital of Culture, Croatia presided the Council of the European Union and also was chairing the European Council in Strasbourg. So these two moments, which was really a rare coincidence in the history of European Capital of Culture, were very important for combining resources and for having joint actions in the promotion of our whole project. And they really helped us a lot. And I think this combination of resources is very important, especially nowadays. You know, your budgets are never too big enough, and especially marketing communication budgets go away very easily and very quickly. Usually European Capitals of Culture spend about 20% on marketing communication budget. It's if you're doing it only from your own budget, it really will never be enough. Of course, city level partnerships are really the first partners that you will go to. In our case, that was city department, PR department, and marketing department, the mayor's office, and also the city tourist office that really join us and were our direct partners in our activities. Next, we went to foreign cultural representatives in Croatia because communicating internationally about your project really starts on your national level. And this is really a network that I encourage you to explore. I'm talking about all embassies in your country and also very importantly, representatives of different cultural institutions, from British Council to Goethe Institute to French Institute, and all different kind of representatives that are in your country, unique network, etc. Next, university, your local university, and their network is also a wonderful channel, but also wonderful partner for international communication. We also had a very unique moment, and that is that Trieste, which is the city in Italy, which is just 70 kilometers from Rijeka, was in 2020 nominated European Capital of Science. And through our university, we cooperated with them in order to build European international project, but also to internationally communicate about what we're doing. And finally, ECoC network, very important. So the city that you are partnering in the year where you are designating, but also the large European network of colleagues and organizations which can, that is a really wonderful channel for your international communication. And finally, large, all other international professional organizations that you can think of. To go back to the timing, we really started strongly communicating about project from the very beginning. We jump-started from the designation moment, and I think it's very important not to miss the years that's right after the designation. The time flies very quickly. Cities tend to be focused on the building the cultural program and implementing it, but communication is very important. One of the things that we did was first of all designating a physical space that was an interface for ECA 2020 narratives and values. And this is the place that you can see in the photo. It's what's called the rehab. It's also the first part of the word is Rijeka and hub, of course, but it also sounds like rehabilitating Rijeka. And this was also a hub where we met with citizens, created programs for their engagement, but also a hub where we also created programs for international communication. First of all, there was a strong educational program that brought to Rijeka experts in different topics, from audience development to international communication to building projects. Really, we brought to Rijeka some of the strongest European names in those areas, and they gave education not just for local people, but also we have different models where we internationally work with other European capitals of culture, but also hosted conferences on the different topics. Just to name two that were really important, for example, conference on cultural diplomacy, or a conference or city branding that brought knowledge to Rijeka, but also were used as tools and channels to spread a word about what we were doing. As I said, the rehab as a physical space was also very important for working with local targeted groups, local citizens, but this is another aspect of communication that is very important, but that is not really specific focus on our topic today. So let's move on to the next slide. When I talked, these are just examples of what I talked about. So we built a joint capacity building initiative with 5 other ECoCs, which was called Lab for European Project Making. Of course, we're member of the Informat network of ECoC, had very strong ties with Galway 2020, and developed projects and communication channels with a lot of European cultural networks, Culture Eastern Europe, Trans Europa Halles, intercultural cities at the Council of Europe, Airways, ACITEJ, NEMO. So these are, I really encourage you to reach towards all of them. They're wonderful for different instances, not just for communicating about your project, but for strengthening your capacities, for building projects, and also for the legacy. All the ties that we had, that we were building throughout the European Capital of Culture years, they remain after 2020, and all of our local partners that work with us and with them will, I'm sure, continue working with all of those institutions, organizations, and networks. And finally, reaching to European funds and projects as a part of, which are also, first of all, seen as a fund, as a source of funding for your program, but they are also very important tools. All the partners that you are going to meet in those projects are very important channels and tools for communicating about what you are doing. I already mentioned the EU presidency of Croatia 2020. This was a very specific a specific platform, specific moment for us, but I'm sure in your countries there must be bilateral or multilateral programs that are going on, and I'm sure they are worth exploring, and it's worth seeing how, or examining how you can combine or link your program with what's going on other levels. Next, please. Citizens are also a very important tool for international communication. We first think of them as a local communicator, but in this case, what you see on a slide is a photo from our volunteering program. I'm sure you're all developing volunteering program, and I'm sure most of you probably know the girl who is at the photo. She's part of European Capitals of Culture program, supported by EU Japan Fest, but very involved in local initiatives. Volunteers will communicate locally, but also they're a wonderful tool, especially if you bring in volunteers from other countries or create volunteering international camps. They are wonderful channels for internationally communicating about your project, and it's also one of the moments that can really remain as a strong legacy moment after your year. As you can notice, I'm talking about legacy all the time, but it's because also I have really this overview of the program from the bidding time till the end and till the what's going on afterwards. But I really encourage you to think always in this complete cycle, because it will. I think it will help you be more concrete and develop the quality of what you are doing, and make the purposeness and the strength of what you are doing more visible. Next. Yes, and of course we also, besides messages, values, exploring tools, channels, etc., we also worked with marketing agency. We also have had a very rather strong, not as strong as in Linz, as we've heard. We had a small team of five people in the Rijeka 2020 organization. Of course, there were many more associates on the outside, but they also developed what is really very marketing speaking, strict strategy of who we are going to reach, and how to geographically disperse these activities. This is also something I think you have to be very careful about, because it needs to be very clear what is realistic about bringing audiences to your city. So I don't know, in our case, it was rather easy to attract people from Ljubljana or from Trieste or from Milan, anything that is within 3 hours driving distance, car driving distance. Of course, it was less likely to attract audiences from Helsinki or much further, unless you had a very high-profiled, attractive program that would reach them. Next slide, please. This is another strategy that we built with our marketing team on how to reach international audiences. Apart from different marketing campaigns, what was very important, was our road shows with cultural promoters, with our partners network. So there we really exploited our links with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, our diplomatic network, their diplomatic network, network of tourist offices, Croatian tourist offices on European and global level. And as I said, those were important, not just as physical spaces that you have abroad, but also because they let us use their resources for our goals. Next slide, please. Media partners. I must say, the media was. There's a very different approach to the media, local and national media and international media. And I must stress that in majority of cases, we had much kinder treatment from international media and more positive reflections and more encouragement, enthusiasm from international media than we had from local media. But I'm sure that's something that we all European capitals of culture encounter. And this is a topic per se, how do we manage these challenges that are, and pressures from political to media pressures that are put on us on local level, while on international level, the reception is usually more positive. Next slide. This is just an illustration and the number of places from our roadshow that we did. Of course, the roadshows were intensified as we were coming closer to the year where we implemented our program. And as I said, the timing is very important. You need to think about your communication strategies. Really, they evolve and they change through time. As we approach the city, the year 2020, the communication became more concrete. The tourist boards, the tourist fairs that we visited or where we were present in 2019 were given very concrete information. So from the video that we saw at the beginning, our story became more concrete with the dates, with names, with the strongest point in our program that could attract international audiences. Next one, please. This is an illustration of what I was talking about. The red part of this slide is actually the cover of booklets that we were using on tourist fairs in 2019 in Milan, Berlin, in Tokyo, in China. As I said, that contained very concrete names of programs like Klimt exhibition, like Phoniadakis performance, like Neat Company festivals, like Nan Hoover exhibition, other big exhibitions that are that speak to international audiences. As Sylvia announced at the beginning, I was supposed to talk also about our international open calls and how we use them to, first of all, strengthen the international part of our program, but also international communication. I must say that our programming was such that almost every program had international international component. There were very few programs that we, so to say, imported. So I don't know, international concerts, things like that. But we really tended toward cooperation. So there was always a local component combined with international component. What I mean by that, I mean our orchestra working with an international renowned conductor or opera star, our puppet theater working with a puppeteer or designer from abroad, etc., etc. So there were different moments of combining international names, European names, European artists, European organizations with our local. I think this moment is very important also for building capacities of local organizations and for the legacy of the project, because all of that knowledge, that networking will remain after the year when you are celebrating your program. Most of that was curated in our case. So most of that, our program managers reached towards different partners on European global level and curated and brought them to Rijeka. However, we had in 2019, we had 2 calls that were open on international level. So they were open to local and national organizations, but also to globally. And 20% of response was from international partners, and they were selected and to participate in our program. Again, that was a tool not just to build the international dimension of our program, but also to internationally communicate about what you are doing. Again, it's not just program, it's not just about city. In our case, it was very important to communicate about values that we wanted to communicate. Next slide, please. February 2020, wonderful opening in Rijeka port. 30,000 spectators, more than 70 events. The name of the program was Opera Industriale. You can still see, some of you might have been in Rijeka, but you can still see a video of the opening on a YouTube channel. It was a really exceptional moment. I almost have tears in my eyes now that I'm talking about that. It was very spectacular. It was very special, and it really had a big bang effect on also on our communication. Next slide. Next, please. Yeah, and it was followed by big carnival events. Rijeka is known for the carnival, but in 2020, this carnival was upgraded with a lot of international groups for European Capital of Culture cities, but also groups from far abroad, from China, Japan, to Brazil, to USA, etc. These images in post-COVID time seem almost unbelievable, but yeah, this was February 2020. Next slide, please. As I said, in terms of communication and international communication, as you can see in this slide, this initial events in January, February 2020 really had a big bang effect. Our media coverage went, don't even look at the figures, but just the sizes of the on the graph illustrate clearly enough what was the effect. This was also important locally because this positive response also from international media, the presence of international media, the presence of international guests in our city also gave us boost and helped us with all those very critical critical response that we were receiving locally. Next image, please. Yes, but then what happened was March 2020. If you remember, in February, all of us received first news from Italy, and all of a sudden, the whole Europe went into lockdown. We were in complete shock. There is no other word to describe, but after 6-7 years of intense work, investment on different levels, not just in terms of budget, but in terms of creativity, people, partnership, etc. We were suddenly in lockdown. The borders were closed. Our international partners could not come to work with us. Audiences could not participate. Well, you know yourself about the measures that were implemented. It was really a disaster for our project. Also, the budgets were cut overnight because the COVID had a domino effect on local, national, and national budgets that were all of a sudden really scaled down drastically. Next slide, please. Just to illustrate the situation, this was in 2019, our huge children's festival, Toboggan, with a lot of people on the streets of Rijeka. Next slide. And this is the same square in 2020, maybe 10% of the audience that we had in 2019. People were sitting on crosses on the floor, so to keep social distances with masks, etc. A big French group was planned. Les Plasticiens Volants was planned for that year. Of course, they couldn't come again. So what we did, we restructured, reprogrammed, put stress on local audiences, on local cultural organizations, on digital communication, and really try to save what was there to be saved. Next slide, please. What is important now, throughout the year, we nevertheless managed to have more than 600 programs till the end of 2020. A lot of programs were moved online. International dimension in programming was severely impacted by COVID, but still international communication remained, and interest from international media still remain. Most of them were interested in how we are coping with the project, and also they are interested in the legacy. So be very prepared for that question. So this is also a question that you will be asked a lot. So what will remain in your city after the year you are celebrating your European Capital of Culture? These are some of illustrations, what is going on as a legacy. For example, this year we were present on Biennale in Venezia with the program Togetherness, Togetherless. That was a direct product of our European Capital of Culture project. And this was a very, as you can imagine, very strong moment for not just for legacy, but also for our international communication. Next slide. Another program was Burning Water, production of contemporary dance performers, choreographed by Antonis Foniadakis, a famous Greek choreographer, a show that was specifically done for European Capital of Culture, ECA, but is still now touring Europe, and I'm sure it will continue to tour as an exceptionally wonderful program. I hope you will have a chance to see it, and it continues to spread message about what we did and about the quality of what we did and about the kind of culture that you can visit and you can experience in Rijeka. Next. And finally, very concrete, very physical legacy of our project. This was the big infrastructural project that was done as a part of European Capital of Culture. More than 27,000 square meters of former industrial heritage that was reconverted and repurposed for cultural purposes. And this new art neighborhood will definitely, now is the moment, and the future we will work on how this will become with the content really true legacy of the European Capital of Culture. Next slide, please. Some problems and issues. It's always very easy to talk about great things that we did, but I'm sure it's for you it's very interesting and important to talk about the challenges. I tried to mention some of them as I went through my slide, but let's just go through some of those moments and think about them. If you try to find answer, they will help you in your international communication. So no clear strategy. Let's not fool ourselves. It's very rare that European Capitals of Culture have very clear strategy. We have something on paper, we put something on paper in our bid books, but very often, that's why, as I said, we need to remind ourselves of our goals, our messages, and how that, and our legacy, and how that influence our program and our communication. Very often we have insufficient planning time. you think you have 3-4 years in front of you, but really time flies quickly. People change, budget change, political support changes, and that's a very, very precious resource time that it's just running on you, and you can do nothing about that. A lot of projects and relationships are not sustainable over time. So maybe you think nowadays that it's a great idea to work with, I don't know, China or Brazil, but you realize in the end that it's just too costly or too time consuming or whatever, and it's not sustainable. So question that. Same goes with the projects that are too ambitious, too difficult to organize. Financial project budgets, I'm sure you know all about that. Our budget was cut by almost 50% due to COVID. There are other moments or other political or whatever economical moments that will influence on your budget. Different political, economic interests, pressures from city level, national level, tension between what local community desires and what you would like to do internationally. This is a very, very critical and very crucial moment, and something that we all need to think about closely, not only when it comes to communication, but when it comes to programming, and something that I'm sure will use a lot of your energy and your time. So I encourage you to really look closely into that and dedicate a lot of energy. Of course, your capital of culture is in your city, it's for the local community, but you also want your city to have international profile. So there is always, there is definitely tension between these two poles. Changes in the team, very important. So the marketing director, we had 3 marketing directors throughout our project. Each one came with a new idea. You know, they do not necessarily build continue, there is not necessarily continuity, so that there is another challenge. So it's important to have at least some people that are continually in your projects to be this collective mind or collective have a collective memory of the project. Think closely about your geographical choices and priorities. Are they strategic or random? Are you going to reach new territories? Why is that important? Of course, thinking about ECoC brand and European dimension, that is very important for the Commission, of course, formally, but I think it's very important for the Europe that we are living in today. And this is, European Capital of Culture is a European initiative, but it really very concretely can happen, the European narrative and the ties within the European project. And finally, European versus international, that's it. Next slide. Yes, and since this is also a wonderful opportunity to communicate internationally about my project, so that I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of our city. I'm very proud of what we achieved in this very difficult year. And I think that the results will be seen, are to be seen in the years to come. So allow me in the end to use this opportunity to do a little bit of international marketing. Thank you. Let's see the video.
Barna Petrani. I'm leading Pro Progressione. And if we go to the next slide, then there are a few details about my organization. Concerning the EU funding, I have to tell you honestly from the beginning that I'm also on the receiving side. So I'm also always listening to this kind of informations from your point of view very often. And I always amazed how much the big numbers. And recently we started to work together quite a lot with the Creative Europe desk. And I am the one who brings those big numbers down into smaller numbers. So what it means for us, the 2.8 billion euros and this, how to say, very unfollowable numbers, which we have also seen in Sylvia's presentation, which are very huge. But what does that mean on our level? So we are based in Budapest, but currently I am at the ITM meeting in Girona. We are working with EU funding since 2010. Mostly in the performing arts, but we started to focus more on the themes rather than the forms. We have a very strong international focus, and we are the leading applicants for or successful applicants for Creative Europe in Hungary. We are in a certain way involved in the 80% of the successful applications and projects in Hungary, and we do a lot of collaborations, and we are also functioning as an umbrella organization, helping young, talented artists. On the next slide, these are the 4 pillars which we are currently having. We're focusing on cultural heritage and natural heritage interpretation. We are focusing on socially engaged art project in another pillar, which is called PP Social. We're focusing on sound and music as mostly as a tradition or a new way of understanding music, as you see in this very fancy lady from Ukraine in the work of Miklós Bot, when she recorded a lot of songs in the rural area of Ukraine. And we have a pillar which is focusing on smaller scale projects, mostly where we are. And I think this is already a tip that before we start a big collaboration on a certain topic, we have some kind of a national level or collaborating with one international organization to testing the theme if it's really in our interest on a long term. Because as we will talk about it, these EU projects are quite long lasting, especially if we also calculate the preparations. So it's good to know that this is something which will be in our interest also in a 4-year span. If we go to the next slide, then I would be talking about Creative Europe program. The Creative Europe program has several territories. The biggest one is the media, which is mostly focusing on film. There is a cross-sectoral pillar, which is now officially, it has an officially dedicated budget. There were a few calls back in the time of 2014, 2020, but now there is a foreseeable cause called InnovLab calls, and focusing on bringing together mostly digitalization and art, and focusing on things when there is a mixture of the sectors. And then there is the culture, which is taking up around the 30% of the budget. I'm not very good in the total numbers, but they are pretty big. You have to see that the funding is from 2021 to 2027. We are quite the lucky one in the culture sector that we had our first call with the deadline on, I think, on the 7th of September, but the very beginning of the autumn. But there is still not crystal clear. So changes are still coming, and the work program for 2022 is still not accepted, I guess. But I think it's very much following the logic of which we had in 2014 to 2020. And then in the culture, there is literature, there is a platform and network funding, there is iPortunus, which you will hear later about, and there is the cooperation project, which is the most common for culture and arts organizations. So I will more dig deep into it. And on the next slide, there are a few details. As Sylvia mentioned, you can go on the website and there is a very detailed description. So I would mostly focus on the topics from an applicant point of view. And for me, the Creative Europe Cooperation Program is the favorite one because of the area is really can cover anything that can be really related to arts and culture. So it's super flexible, and you will see that we also had very, very different projects, from traditional music to socially engaged art practices. There are two objectives. You have to select one of it when you are doing the application. So it's either or. One is the transnational creation and circulation, which I think it speaks for itself. And the innovation, which is also includes training. So when there is some kind of an innovative outcome of the project. And there are priorities. These are the priorities which are set for the 7-year period. It hasn't really changed since the last funding period from 2014 to 2020. That includes the audience or audience development, so ways how you can engage the audience more, even on a vertical and a horizontal level. So how you can engage the audience, which you have to be more active as your audience, or how you can reach out to your audience. Social inclusion, especially together with audience, focusing on involving a variety of the society. Then we have sustainability, which doesn't only include environmental sustainability, but social or financial sustainability. There is new technology, which is a little bit relates to InnovLab, and that's my experience is there is a lot of projects which are going into priorities of new technology, which could also go into InnovLab. And then there is, of course, the international dimension, which is mostly about either exchanging our products or creating art or cultural projects together with artists from different countries. The lengths of the projects are 12 to 48 months. It's usually on the other end. So at the end, when you put together your project design, it will come somewhere closer to the 4 years than to the 1. So it's very rarely that you could finish a larger scale project in a year. And you have to add an evaluation period of, the EU says it's maximum 6 months. I would say rather it's minimum 6 months, and sometimes it goes to 7 to 8 months, plus the preparation time. And that's why I said that a project with all its preparation and the final reporting, it can easily take up to 6 years. There are 3 categories. Now the small one where you have to have 3 partners, and now it is important to talk about the partnerships. So when I say you have to have 3 partners, it has to mean 3 different countries from the eligible countries, which beside the member states of the European Union, it goes up to 41 countries, but it's a changing number because new countries are joining, but it includes Ukraine, it includes the southern part of the Mediterranean Sea, so it includes some of the countries south from Europe, and it also includes countries from the Caucasus. But you have to be careful. But because they are based on bilateral contract between the EU and the country, so it is changing. It's always advisable to check for each call what is the eligible country. But all EU countries and EET countries, so Norway, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, Iceland, they are all included in the program. The bad news is that at the current moment, the United Kingdom is not included neither in the Creative Europe program nor in the Erasmus Plus program, which we will talk a little bit later about. But what I have experienced is that the cultural scene in the UK is trying its best to somehow catch up, and you can have third partners or third country partners, which means that they cannot benefit, but they can participate in the program. And the European or the British Art Council is really trying to help to bring a UK organization on board. So the small category is 3 partner, up to 80% co-financing from the EU and maximum 200,000 euros. So it means an ideal budget around 250,000 euros. There is a mid-scale, which is a new form, so it hasn't existed before, this in between. It requires 5 partners. It will have 70% of co-financing from the EU and the maximum of €1 million financing amount. That means a budget around €1.5 million. Here, I have to mention that based on the applications made in the 7th of September, half of the project went into the mid-scale, because this is the more suitable one, because it has quite a big budget, but to have 5 partners is still not so far. And the idea of the EU is that they share the amount of money equally between the 3 categories. So they give 35% for the small, 35% for the mid-scale, and 30% of the total funding to the large-scale ones, which means that there would be around 10 to 20 or around 20 supported application in each year in the mid-scale and around 100 in the small scale. However, the same amount of application we're going in for the 2 categories. So it means that it is much, much easier to go for the small scale. And the EU is also supporting it very much, because it was quite a closed system that new organizations are coming in and applying and can be successful. And then there is the large scale, which requires 10 partners and have a budget of €2 million from the EU and the total budget around 3.5 million. So that's really a bigger scale. And there they support around 10 projects per year, or they will probably support around 10 projects per year. And there was an application number around 30 application which were sent in September. We can go to the next slide a little bit, because I wrote a few examples what kind of projects we had in this call. And the first one is What's Up, which is, it states for what is social art practices. And the main aim is how can we turn social art practices into a widely known professional field of work. It's a 2-year-long project. We have 4 partners. It was a small-scale project supported in the last round of the last financial period. And we are holding workshops, academies, but we are also focusing on local work. So there is some EU funding which is not going into international work, but goes directly on a local level work with underprivileged youngsters. And we also have a few associated partners. So it was, as this is the main topic, or the main focus is on inclusion, we have chosen associated partners who are working with underprivileged youngsters. In the house is from Hungary. Probably some of you know them. They are in close to Miskolc, a little bit north from Miskolc. We can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about Erasmus+, which and again, a personal perspective or an organizational perspective, that we have discovered Erasmus+ after doing a few Creative Europe program, and we have realized that this is also a very good funding scheme if we are not doing something which is only focusing on art, but if it has a training approach. It has areas in higher education, vocational education and training, school education, adult education, youth, and sport. I have to be honest, I'm not very experienced in the sport one, but we have been applying and we have been successful in a few other ones. There are 2 types of program in Erasmus+, or 3 types of programs, sorry. The first one is the mobility, that's the key action 1. It is either the exchange of target group or the exchange of the experts working with the target group. So in case, for example, in the area of youth, it's either the exchange of the youth itself, or it can be the exchange of the professionals working with the youth. The key action 2 is a strategic partnership, where you have 2 types. One is focusing on innovation, which means that there is a new outcome. So for example, methodology, which didn't existed before. And I will give you a few examples on that. Or there is kind of exchange or best practice exchange, knowledge sharing way when the different organizations are working together. There is a novelty from 2021, which also helps people to jump into Erasmus+ key action 2, is that there is a I called it large scale, but that's what existed before. So the previous Key Action 2 strategic partnerships had a budget up to 400,000 euro. We had budgets around 200,000 euro in our successful applications, but the applications process was quite harsh. So we ended up with applications of 250 pages. So the EU have decided that they are supporting also smaller scale organizations and people who are just starting to understand the Erasmus Plus. So there is also a new form of small scale strategic partnerships, and there they have a deadline every 4 months. So it is also easier to reapply, make an application, understand if it is not successful, why not, and then you can quite quickly reapply, because in the case of the strategic partnership is the same as the Creative Europe, that mostly they have one call per a year. In the case of the Key Action 1 in the mobility, they also have a call twice or 3 times a year. It also depends on the different agencies, because it is important to understand that in case of the Erasmus Plus, however the evaluation is independent, the application is handled by an organization within the country where the application was handed in. So for example, we in Hungary, we are applying for the Tempus Foundation. And then there is a Key Action 3, which is more about policy. And I have to be honest, I am not super experienced in that one. So I just mentioned it, that it exists, but also here the budget is way smaller than for the other 2 key actions. So my first example for Key Action 1 is our academy, which is a 2-week-long academy. And we are scaling up or skilling 40 professionals from the social and educational fields with artistic tools, how to work with underprivileged youngsters. This is very interesting because originally we had a Creative Europe program, or that was even a culture program back in 2012. And there we have organized from that budget an academy, and that was super successful. So we have decided that we would like to continue partly with the same partners. And that's how we started to work with Erasmus Plus. So it was originally a successful Creative Europe program with different activities, and we took an activity and we transformed it into an Erasmus Plus type of exchange. And we are having it every year since 2016. We have 8 partners from 8 different countries, and they are coming, 5 of them, so it's a total of 40 people coming for 2 weeks to Hungary every summer. It's a flat rate budget, so the budget comes to around 45,000 euro for financing the cost for these 2 weeks, meaning mostly the accommodation, the food, and some fee for the trainers, and the travel cost for the participants. We can go to the next slide to see an example of for Key Action 2. I took the example of the folk music education for future generations. This is an innovative educational project. So it went into the innovation category. And however, there is no school involved, like public school involved. The target is public education and music enthusiasts to provide them with a tool how to digitally learn and relearn music. And we are developing a digital toolkit, which will be soon available, mostly for teachers in public schools. And it is also based originally on the Creative Europe program, which was the polyphony, which I shortly mentioned at the beginning. That's lasted for 2 years, from 2017 till 2019. And we have been working in Ukraine, collecting the traditional music, the still existing traditional music in the rural area. And then we have been thinking what comes next. And we have realized that the next step is the education. So how does this tradition goes back to the society? And then together with the artistic leader, Miklós Bot, we have applied for this specific Key Action 2 strategic partnership with high-end musical institutions, and also the organizers of Womex, the Piranha Arts, to distribute a little bit the outcomes of the project. I will very shortly talk about the evaluation because I think this is important to understand. All the evaluation is based on independent experts. And it is very important that from 2021, especially in Creative Europe, the experts have the same knowledge as we as applicant can have. So basically, they are looking at the call and they are evaluating based on the call. So it makes your life easy to understand what the evaluator will do. There are four main areas of evaluation, also in the Erasmus Plus and also in Creative Europe. The first one is the why we do that. That's the relevance. What we do, that's the quality of the project content, and who is doing it. So that's the partnership. And then there is the fourth one, which is about communication, dissemination, and how we are reaching for a wider target group. So even if we are working in a smaller partnership, how the outcomes are reaching a little bit out. And here I would like to highlight is that probably the most important thing is what you have to start with is the relevance. Is my idea relevant for the code? Because everything else, if the relevance is strong, then everything else can be built up. But the relevance is really based on the project's core idea, and probably that's also the hardest to detail and write down. There are specific questions in the application, so they guide you through and a little bit helps your thinking. But I have an example from the last month that we have a project for Erasmus Plus, which was not accepted, and I called up the agency if I should reapply or not. And when I told that we were above the threshold, but in certain things we haven't reached the number because the evaluation is so that you have to reach 50% in each of these categories, but 60% in total. So from 100 points, I have to have 60, but in each category, I have to have the 50%. They immediately asked me if I was below the 50% in the relevance, because I'm in below the 50% in the relevance, then I really have to rethink the whole project. And when I told them that no, the relevance was fine, we had problems in other aspects, then they said that yes, then you are supposed to reapply because that's much easier to fix and rethink and reapply the applications. And what is very important, that every applicant receive a detailed written evaluation. So the experts are not only giving you points, but they also tell you why they are giving those points to you. So it is a good source to reapply if the application was not successful. And if it is successful, in some cases, it means that still based on the evaluation before the contract, certain changes are required from your side, or you have to clarify a few things before the EU signs the contract with you. We can go to the next slide. And this is the last slide from my side. Yeah, I think the most important is that the project is more important than the application. So you have to have a good project idea and then go for the application and not the other way around. The long preparation. So we are preparing our applications almost for a year. So we are really thinking a lot about the content. Decide which is mostly for you. If it's very much training based, because Erasmus Plus is hardly supporting any other costs than fees, travel, and accommodation. Then if it is training based, then it's Erasmus Plus. If it's very much creation based, so for example, you have to buy a lot of things, then it can be only in the Creative Europe. It's important to talk about the partners. We have mentioned it, but it's also nice to get to know the partners in advance because they are someone whom you are supposed to work for several years. And then there are the roles which you also have to decide that there is the main applicant, the one which is signing the contract with the European Commission. There is the partner who is financially takes part in the project and receive funding from the EU. And then there is the associated partner or the initiator, which in the case of the European Capitals of Culture can be the case, who somehow pushes the whole idea forward, but officially doesn't take part in the project implementation and in the application process, but for example, host the outcomes of the project applications and the project itself.
my topic today is everything around cultural mobility that could be relevant for your initiatives in the context of European capitals of culture and other initiatives that take place in capital of culture cities. I will focus predominantly on the things the European Cultural Foundation, together with partners, has been realizing in the past years and what is forthcoming. I maybe have to say at the beginning, everything at the moment, there is no immediate opportunity to apply for funding anywhere, or a deadline that you would miss, which is maybe also a relaxing thought that before Christmas you don't have to rush into anything anymore. So everything I'll talk about will only come in the future. As we had in the past quite a lot to do already through our tandem program with European Capitals of Culture. I think many have heard of the European Cultural Foundation. Nevertheless, I start with a short intro where we come from and why we are so much in cultural mobility. So the European Cultural Foundation is a small lottery financed independent foundation, the only cultural foundation with a European mandate, the all European mandate, based in Amsterdam. We were founded in Switzerland more than 60 years ago already by a Swiss philosopher called Denis de Rougemont and Robert Schuman, the founding father of the European Union, was our first president. We are not that well known in the foundation landscape, more in the cultural landscape, but everyone, I think, around Europe knows a mobility program which we conceptualized and implemented together with the European Union for many long years, which is the Erasmus Students Exchange. And why I mentioned that, because all our programs in the field of bringing Europeans, cultural initiatives, artists and ideas together across borders are still working in the same spirit. And you will hear a little bit later on from me that the Erasmus story, the Erasmus example, is also for the European Union and in the field of culture, again, a kind of like a reference model. This topic of mobility is in which in this context in which mobility is discussed, and also new programs are coming. I start with talking about a program that has been around for the past years, explicitly supporting artists and cultural professionals in their individual mobility. And now I start sharing my screen. And that is the IPOTUNUS, the so-called IPOTUNUS houses, IPOTUNUS scheme. So European Cultural Foundation and others were among the pioneers for basically 20 years already, promoting the mobility of artists and cultural professionals across borders. We, for many long years, had a travel grant support program called STEP. And the European Cultural Foundation is also promoting and working on getting its ideas from the ground on collaborations from collaborations with initiatives that are on the ground and partner organizations into EU programs, into EU policymaking. And then 4 years ago, I think the European Union Creative Europe program, and in this context, decided that cultural mobility was an extremely important topic to pick up in the field. And they started to experiment and explore different designs and support mechanisms for artists and cultural professionals under this slightly, some say awkward name of IPOTUNUS. You see the website you see on the screen is the website of this European Union pilot programs. In the past years, 2 different strands were implemented. One was realized by the Goethe Institute that was really for individual travel support where artists and cultural professionals could apply. for traveling, visiting, artists' residences, anything that had to do with travel support in one of the 41 Creative Europe countries. And that was running until recently in a second round, also implemented by the Goethe Institute, and is closing in 2 weeks on the 9th of December with a big presentation event, which I think can also still join. Our scheme, the one implemented by the European Cultural Foundation, by Midost, an NGO based in Berlin, we have been working for many long years, among other on Tandem, and a public foundation from Croatia called the Kultura Nova Foundation. We realized this Ipertunus houses scheme, which was a second pilot scheme that was focusing, and I believe could be more interesting even for initiatives working in the context of European Capitals of Culture, the so-called Ipertunus houses. So Ipertunus houses was actually a support scheme for hosts that could apply with minimum 2 and maximum 5 artists or cultural professionals together, visiting them for realizing a project in the framework of a short-term residency. As we started during the pandemic to roll out this scheme, there was also a strong digital component. Now, I mentioned these were pilot schemes. So these 2 schemes are actually wrapping up now. The Ipertunus houses is still running, but the deadlines are closed. We have 72 hosts and their artists and professionals who will realize their projects and mobilities in the next few months. But this program, as you see it here, will close. But, and that's maybe the most important news to tell you about, the European Commission has recently, and that's still like internal information, so there is no call, no public appearance of this news yet. That will only come next year. The plan is now to come with something, and there we go back to our Erasmus history, to come with something that is running under the working title Erasmus for Culture, and that will offer in the future, in the next 3 years, mobility support for artists, cultural professionals, and again, also host organizations. So they were skeptical about the pilot we did, European Cultural Foundation with Ost and Kultura Nova did in this field, I have to say, but we are very convinced, and we ourselves as well, by this scheme with the host organizations. And this Erasmus for Culture working title, it will, we heard it will not be called Ipertunus anymore, but maybe Erasmus for Culture, maybe something else, will have a budget of 20 million euros in the next, more than 20 million euros in the next 3 years. Consortia will be invited in the next weeks or months to bid for that consortia. So for you in the field, watch out, as of next year, there will be some support opportunities under a heading of Erasmus for Culture, another name, along the lines of EU support for artists and cultural professionals. And we can go maybe deeper in what I have heard about that in the Q&A. This was the main part on what is coming forward. As Westbrem and other Capital of Culture representatives or colleagues from other capitals of culture, as far as I could see on the screen, are also present here. Many of you have heard of the Tandem cultural collaboration programs, which European Cultural Foundation and Midost, together with many partner organizations, have realized for the past 10 years. We're celebrating tonight, actually, our 10th anniversary of this program family, I should say. And we, in the past, have also been running together with, in total, if I remember correctly, 12 to 15 different Capital of Culture events. So past, present, and future upcoming ones, including Westbrem, but also including Wroclaw and others. A specific Tandem cultural collaboration and exchange scheme, where managers of cultural initiatives spend the time in their Tandem partner organization and host a partner from their partner organization in the European Capital of Culture in the framework of a year-long program. We have offered this program specifically for capitals of culture twice now, a specific edition for Leeuwarden de Friesland together with Rijeka Capital of Culture. So this is something we did in the past. This is something we are theoretically still interested in. We have no concrete plans to offer that, because that also always depends on the interest and co-financing of capitals of culture organizations to offer that for their cultural field in preparation of the Capital of Culture coming up. Of course, you all know how important the European dimension is in these cultural capital events, and Tandem in the past has been a program that was often supporting cultural initiatives, so not the organization as such, but cultural initiatives and arts organizations working in capitals of culture to connect across borders and to build strategic partnerships for the future. So this is just an offer that also in the future European cultural foundations and others may be interested to design a new edition of Tandem program or a similar program to bring people together across borders and across capital of culture events. What is also currently not open, but a concrete possibility for you, this is the landing page of our Culture of Solidarity Fund, which we launched as an answer to closing borders in the beginning of the pandemic last year. Meanwhile, so it's not as such an emergency fund, but it is an answer to the emergency of closing borders in times of pandemic, which was last year a huge topic, which now again in this phase is an issue that again there are travel restrictions coming up possibly or already in place, events cancelled and things like that. The reason why I mentioned the Culture of Solidarity Fund to you also as a future opportunity is that it came in a number of open, but also in a number of regionally specific, for example, with initiatives in the north of Italy, but also thematic specific editions. Most recently, we did a big call on cultural projects for regional transformation that involved at least two or more transformational regions in Europe in cultural projects that were addressing transformational challenges on a regional level, but especially in a pandemic context. And as I know, many of the upcoming capitals of culture are located in similar regions of all sorts of transition, and everyone is faced by the pandemic transition now. This would have been an opportunity to apply, but we may also come with new thematic editions in this context, and certainly with new thematic editions of this Culture of Solidarity Fund next year. Final topic I want to touch upon, because it will frame a lot of the work on cultural mobility the European Cultural Foundation is doing. And I see already a question by Paulina, what the goal of this Erasmus for Culture will be. So it is similar to the opportunities also to support mobility of artists and cultural professionals across border. What will play a big role in our own mobility work in the future, and also what is our contribution to the ongoing Opportunus pilot project is a study on the future of cultural mobility, where especially the very tricky question of the climate damaging effect mobility and traveling has will be also tackled in the context of like, what can we do? What are their tools to travel more responsibly, travel less, travel more or with less CO2 exhausting causing means of transport, and all these like very tricky questions, which Cultura Nova is currently also working on in a study that we will present the next year as an outcome also, and that will feed into this new Erasmus for Culture also. I want to close with some open, a few sentences that are open and still under development at the moment and are bothering us very much in the a question of cultural mobility and climate transformation, climate crisis, climate justice. Also, when we think about in a global context, where I think there's a specific responsibility of individuals, but traveling, but also organizations hosting artists and cultural professionals. Our answer to that will be next year to experiment with a CO2 tax, which we add to our own travel, because you all experience and know that we often are still, so to say, financially obliged to go with EasyJet and Ryanair on cheap flights, because in the arts and cultural field, the budgets are usually not so high. And that, of course, is always kind of like, we did in the past experiment with giving more travel support to train travels, which, however, for artists and cultural professionals were simply not attractive enough because it was still cheaper to fly. And for that reason, we're going to offer a support scheme that helps also artists, cultural professionals to invest in compensating for the CO2 footprint cultural mobility inevitably will always cause. Also in terms of inclusiveness, because, for example, yeah, you cannot come from Georgia by train unless you're 2 weeks on the road. So this is also a support scheme in the context of our cultural mobility and support we will develop and offer next year, and is maybe something also for capitals of culture organizations working in this context to join. But this is not ready yet and will be public in the context of our work and our online resources next year. I think I'll leave it here. So reiterate, Albertunus will turn into Erasmus for Culture in the next years. Cultures of Solidarity Fund is an option, and cultural mobility and climate crisis and transformation is one aspect that will play an important role in our work and all our support programs in the next years.
So I'm Fanny Bobak and working at Exante Consulting. I'm working on preparing and implementing international transitional projects since more than 6 years. So I'm here now to give you insights about Interreg, but mainly about the Danube Transitional Program. So we can go to the next slide just to check about what I will speak about. So we will go through mainly about the priority, which is focusing on culture. And I will share with you what's available about the upcoming call of the Danube Transitional Program, since we are still in the transition phase and it's still they're preparing the next call. And I've collected some hints and tips. I really hope, I do not know how much you are experienced in being a partner or writing a Danube Transitional Program, but I've collected some tips to you, and I really hope that it will be useful to you in the future. And we will have an overlook about some examples and about some other Interreg programs. So we can go to the next slide. It's just very quickly the map of the focus area, or the area of the Danube Transitional Program. It covers 14 countries along the Danube. This is actually the program with the highest number of countries actually among the Interreg programs. And as you might know, or it was already mentioned, the Danube Transitional Program is a financing instrument of the European Territorial Cooperation. So it just to make it sure you're aware of the information from Germany and Ukraine, that all the countries part of the focus area. It's quite important when you are searching for partners, I have to say. So if we go to the next slide, you can see both the previous and the priorities of the upcoming period. It just shortly to highlight that if you are already experienced in DTP, then be aware of the fact that previously culture was part of priority 2, but now it moved to priority 3. So the 4 new priorities, priority areas are the smarter Danube region, a greener low carbon Danube region, a more social Danube region, and the better cooperation governance in the Danube region. And as I mentioned, we are still in the transition phase. So there were several meetings already, and a task force document is already available. And it's in a later slide, it's included to my presentation. So if you will get it, you will just easily get the access to the document. So the 4 priorities will be like this, and the specific objectives as well, but that all the frames of the new calls are already set. But the specific objectives of all the priorities are already available. Here in my presentation, I wouldn't go into detail of all. I will just highlight the priority 3 to you, which is like the cultural related priority. But I highly encourage you, whenever you are there, to go through all, because mainly you will also find some opportunities in the other priorities. So on the next slide, you can see the priority 3 and its specific objectives, and especially the specific objective 3.3, the socio-economic development through heritage, culture, and tourism, the one which is the best related to cultural institutions, culture-related institutions. So maybe you've discussed about it with Silvia already, but here I would like to highlight that the Interreg programs are mainly for, like, so to say, bigger institutions, in a sense that these are like really complex projects financed under the Danube Transitional Program. So you really have to have the staff and budget behind. That's why actually I was, as you know, like asked for to speak about this Interreg. I will later on show to you the potential partners. I just wanted here to highlight again that the complexity of the Interreg project. So the Danube region is actually characterized by like an outstanding cultural diversity, but this has left a rich legacy of intangible and tangible heritage, which is often not recognized towards economic development, social inclusion, social innovation, and that's the kind of aim of this priority, to really support the change with this. And usually bigger cities or capital cities maybe can use this or better use these available heritages already, but the Danube Transitional Program would like to really make the local and regional participants also into the conversation and make the connection between the local and wider Danube region. So if we go to the next slide, here's more details about this specific objective 3.3. All specific objectives, so in a case of all specific objectives, there are focus areas defined already in the task force document, and it will be detailed whenever the call is launched. So you can see here that mainly culture, heritage, and tourism is, so to say, a kind of instrument towards, as was already mentioned, the economic development, social inclusion, and social innovation. And I just would like to highlight how much you should really keep it in mind when preparing a project proposal and thinking about the potential idea that would fit into the Danube transnational program. On the next slide, you can see some expected results and examples for possible actions that the DTP already defined for us. So, for example, improving the accessibility of tourism and culture infrastructure. It's really important that it's really support, and it's really important that it would like to provide these services for the vulnerable groups. Also, a valorization of joint natural culture, heritage, and culture activities, such as like hiking, cultural routes, cycling, or in the preparation of other thematic routes. We will check some previous projects on a later slide, but if you've heard already about some DTP projects, you might know that projects which is like along thematic routes are quite, so to say, famous, or there are plenty of projects that was formed along this possible action. Also, capacity building, development of innovative models for community-based tourism is really important. Promoting quality products, services, transnational infrastructure in the tourism and culture sector, and the promote of sustainable and slow tourism concepts, planning methodologies, model regions. So these are really just examples, a non-exclusive, exhaustive list, but it's, I think, really good that they support us with really highlighting these examples, and also the expected results help us a lot to, whenever you are there, to form project proposals. So really your output at the end could be these thematic routes, concept plans and models, and maybe it's good to highlight here that all the results you will have, or the results the project has at the end of the implementation period, should be really transferable and show as best practice to other regions and countries. So we can go to the next slide, where I've tried to collect all the available information about the budget of the next period. So here you can see that we know that from the European Regional Development Fund, the next 4 years of the DTP will have around 170 million euros. And that's the latest information I know. It was I've heard on a conference this week that hopefully whenever we know the IPA and then the ICI contributions, the total budget will end up around 215, 270 million euros. But as mentioned, it's still under planning. The total budget is around 20% less than in the previous period, and which is an important change is that the new co-financing rate is 5% less than it was. So it's now, so to say, only 80%, but that's still the 10% national co-financing as a pre-financing rate. I it might differ across countries, so it's also something you should check whenever you are there of preparing a proposal and your budget. So it seems in the new period, 10% will be the own contribution that an applying partner will have to cover, but that's usually manageable with staff costs. And there's a small mistake on my presentation because usually our general project budget is in between 1.5 and 2.5 million euros for the whole partnership. Okay, so on the next slide, I've collected some information about the potential beneficiaries. So here you can see the main types of a potential beneficiary. These can be local, regional, national, public bodies, bodies governed by public law, international organizations also, but private bodies as well. And it's really important to have a wide range or as diverse the partnership is the best. There's a rule that at least there should be 3 partners from different countries, but generally or usually a partnership or a consortium is set up with 8 and 15 partners from 6 and 8 countries. And apart or beside that, there's associated partners also in a consortium. That's the bigger the partnership is, the consortium is, the harder to coordinate and lead it, which might be really different or difficult, but it's really important to have a diverse partnership from different countries of the area of the 10-year transnational program. It's an additional point whenever the proposal is there by the evaluators, and it's when there's so many different partners. I believe then, or it's also based on experiences, it's very important whenever you are brainstorming and really working on your project. And the associated partners, maybe you know it, but it's good to highlight that they are not having an own budget. The associated partners can be there on the events, project events, or partner meetings, and their travel is financed by one of the partners. So each partner has an associated partner, or some of the partners will have an associated partners. That's mainly the fact. I should highlight it by the specific objectives, but maybe it's important, or it's also good here to highlight that each project under the prepared under the DTP should really connect or build on the European Union Danube region strategy goals and aims. And there's this is the EU HDR, which has like 12 priority areas, and the specific objective 3.3 and the priority 3 actually is connects to the priority area 3. And also, since I've mentioned that it's really important to gain economic development and the social innovation and inclusion, it also in a connection and built on priority area 9 and 10. So I highly support you or suggest to check the priority areas and check the EU HDR goals. It's also why it came into my mind here by the potential beneficiaries is that it's also good if you have a kind of letter of support from the relevant priority area coordinator. It's hard to get, but really worth it. So it's just another hint to have in mind whenever you are there to prepare a proposal. On the next slide, you can see a kind of timeline of the first call in the new period. That's the latest information I know, and as mentioned, it was said during the conference this week as well. So really, there's no more new information. You can expect the launch of the first step in spring 2020. So it will be a two-step procedure. I would say that only the expression of interest will have to be submitted in spring, but that's almost the whole project that you have to prepare for that that time. It only means that whenever your project is will be chosen to be able to apply for the second step, which is planned to be at the end of the next year, then in between you will still have the chance to like change the partnership or change some part of your project proposal, and the final approval is expected for mid 2023. And really that's the best tip is that so there's not really a chance that your project will be able to start before autumn 2023, so it's quite a time. On the next slide and the next few slides, I've collected some hints and tips, summarized along with the preparation and the proposal writing process. So sorry if you are aware of some of those, but maybe it's good to highlight. So I would suggest that prior proposal writing, and when the call is maybe not already launched, you should already analyze the needs in your region and have an idea. And I would like to suggest that prior, like really deeply analyzing the specific objectives and the task force document, it's better if you already have an idea in mind, and then you can fix it to the requirements of the program. But then for sure check its significance and relevance to the priorities. And it's also really important to analyze your network and really think over who would you like to work with, and what type of partners you need or for your project proposal. And or if you are not applying or if you are not leading or wanting to lead a project, then also what kind of partnership you would like to join. The DTP website, social media is always up to date, and I highly recommend to already discuss your interest with your national contact point. This is the NCP. I will show the contact details of the Hungarian one to you. And there's also a possibility on the DTP website to submit your project idea, and there others can check it and maybe express their interest to join your consortium, or that's also the way you can look through the submitted ideas and get in contact with those partners whose idea you really like. On the next slide, some hints. Well, it's just very quickly the two-step. I do not really want to go into detail. It just shows the difference between the first and the second step, and highlights the seed money facility. That's also a link included. Actually, this is a possibility to cover your preparation phase. So I highly recommend to check the website and check whenever it's open. It could be a really good support for really creating a good proposal. And then on the next slide, there's some hints and tips for whenever the call is open and you're starting to write a proposal. The information events are really useful. I'm really speaking it from experience, so the Joint Secretariat always share good information, and the events are really widely visited, and it's a good chance to network and find possible projects to join, proposals to join, and find possible partners. Usually, if you analyze your network and you are lacking of partners or relevant partners with a lacking of relevant expertise, it's also really good to have like a good one-pager and then go for like so-called search and really just I suggest to connect those institutions who you do not know but would be relevant to your proposal. And when you are having the core concept, then you might know that the application form actually in the DTP is quite detailed and long. And there's in the first, we will check the parts. The first part, there are questions, and then also there's the work packages part. And whenever you have the core concept, first really form the work packages and then go back to the other questions, because the work packages will be the core of your proposal, and you will have the outcomes and deliverables along the work packages. If you are the leader of the proposal, so you are the lead beneficiary, you will have the most job, or really you will have the highest responsibility, but really try to have an active partnership and ask for the support during the proposal writing. And it's also good to have a kickoff already in this phase with them. And yes, we can. I'll go to the next slide, and there's some. Yeah, here is the application form, just to show how this complex document is built up. And then on the next slide, there's some hints and tips whenever you submitted your proposal. Really be patient, because it really can take several months to have the final evaluation. But be prepared, because as I mentioned, there are you have to pre-finance not only the 10%, but you will get the first amount of money only after the first half year and after the first report. Be conscious, know who will be responsible from your staff for the different roles in your proposal. Keep in touch with the partnership. That's also really important, I think. And you can already be informed, analyze the implementation document, and be and prepare. Well, mainly these incentives were, it's again, it's not a full list. There's a lot of other things which is good to know about, but these were mainly when you are a lead beneficiary. But when you are joining a consortium, on the next slide, some other tips, really try to find a project proposal which really fits to your long-term goals, and try to check how strong the partnership is, and really work with partners with whom you can build a long-term a connection and a good connection. It's highly recommended to go for a work package leadership role, because then you will really learn a lot. And so if you have the relevant expertise, it's nice to be that much involved in a proposal. Of course, it goes with more money as well. And try to be proactive, but learn a lot from the process. And really, it can be a base for a future lead beneficiary role. On the next slide, there are some previous projects which were, you can see, prepared. These were implemented under the same specific objective and priority in the previous period, but these were quite successful projects. And there's also a link included to my slide, and you can see, but by the Danube Herb and the Art Nouveau, they're already, they were not prolonged, but kind of the number 2 projects were submitted also. So that means that they were really successful ones. The Danube Urban brand is kind of network, building of the network around the Danube through tourism and education. The Budapest Technological University, BMA is the lead beneficiary of this project, actually. The Art Nouveau was around the Art Nouveau heritage in the Danube region, and the Rediscover was around the Jewish heritage. These are just really a few examples of possible results and projects. I highly recommend to check the website of these. As I mentioned, or it was actually on one of the previous slides, that it's highly recommended to do a kind of desk research when you are in the, just before you have the idea and start writing your proposal. It's also really important to check the previous projects. Do not do the same what was already did, and the DTP is really supports the synergy between the projects. So it's really good if you mention in your proposal that you build some of your expected results on, for example, the Danube, and I just said something, so on one of the previous projects, or if you are in a partnership where partners participated in previous project, that's also really good. On the next slide, you can see the contact of the Hungarian national contact point. And here I would like to highlight that the Joint Secretariat is also in Hungary, which is really an advantage. And so I really recommend to get in touch with Béla Hegyesi, and he can kind of serve, and his colleagues also. So whenever you have an idea, and either you would like to be just a partner in a project, or be the lead beneficiary, a consultation with the contact point can serve as kind of a mentorship and supervision role he has, and he can support you with extra ideas and support you with the how to find more partners. But of course, if you feel that you do not have the enough capacity and stuff to write a proposal, or you are really new in this process, you can also work with companies specialized on supporting partners. And I'm kind of running out of time, so just very quickly on the next slide. So I just really wanted to highlight that there are other programs as well, these cross-border cooperation programs, for example, but on the map you can see that the county of Veszprém is unfortunately out of any, so not part of these cross-border programs. But since here there's a lot of, you are from maybe from other counties and countries, I highly recommend to check also these, because they have culture-related priorities. On the next slide, there's included a really good tool which supports you to search for the relevant Interreg programs you can apply for.